Hello, welcome to my reading vlog. I hope you are having a really lovely day. I hope you had a good Christmas. At the time of filming this, it's actually before Christmas, but I am 100% sure that this video is not going to go up before Christmas. So yeah, I hope you had a lovely one. And if you don't celebrate Christmas, I hope you had a really nice couple of days off with your family, doing whatever you like to do. I hope it was really lovely for you. So today's vlog is linked to my 2025 reading goals video. So if you haven't seen that, I will link it up there. I was gonna say up below. So one of my goals is to read the nominees and the winners for the GoodReads Awards 2024, just to try and pick up some books that are hyped that maybe weren't on my radar. And I don't want to read every single book in the categories. I just want to read the ones that, you know, like pique my interest. So the plan is to do a vlog per category. This vlog is going to be YA Fantasy, and there are quite a few YA fantasies that I want to pick up. So instead of doing them all in one video, I'm going to separate them into parts. So in this video, I am going to be reading three books and reviewing one, because I have already read one of the nominees, so I thought I could review it in this video and then read the other three. I will be reading Dragon Fruit by Makia Lucia, and The Poisons We Drink by Bethany Baptiste, and Don't Let the Forest In by, is it C.G. Drews? And the one book I have already read is The Invocations by Crystal Sutherland. So these obviously are all YA fantasy books. None of these are the winners. The winner, I think, was actually the second book in the Divine Rivals series. I'm not sure if it's a duology or if more books are coming, but that was nominated, and I haven't read Divine Rivals. So I probably won't be reading that in a vlog because I would have to read the first one and then the second one. So I will probably do a separate video just reading the Divine Rivals books. And all of these books are very, very different. So although they all fit into YA fantasy, they all focus on really different things. So like The Invocations is witchcraft and death magic, whereas Dragon Fruit is Pacific Island mythology and romance. So there's a little bit of variety. I'm really excited to pick up books that may not necessarily have been on my radar. And like I said in my 2025 reading goals video, I tend to sort of peg hole myself into certain categories of books, and I haven't strayed out of that genre. But it meant that last year, well, technically still this year as I'm filming it, but in 2024, I didn't pick up that many books because I was like, I'm only going to read witchy dark fantasy, things that were similar to books that I've already read and loved. So I wasn't really diversifying my reading. It was all very, very similar. And I want to get out of that habit. I want to read more things. I want to fall in love with books that I may not necessarily have picked up. And an example of that is Dragon Fruit. So I have already started reading that. And this is not a book that I ever would have picked up off my own accord. I would not have picked this up because it is about dragons. It has a romance. It seems like quite adventurous fantasy, whereas I tend not to read books like that. But actually, so far, I am loving it, and I am so glad that this was on the GoodReads Awards list because I wouldn't have picked it up otherwise. And I haven't actually seen anyone talking about it anywhere else. But then again, like, I watch a lot of BookTube. I don't watch like Book Talk, and I've only just started a Bookstagram. So my entire recommendations and experience with the book community has solely been BookTube up to this point. So I subscribe to people who have similar tastes to me. So I have really been limiting myself with what is like on my radar, what's around me. So I haven't seen anything about this book, but it was on sale on Kindle, so I thought I would give it a try, and so far I am loving it. So let's just get into the Dragon Fruit review section. So like I said, I have been reading it on my Kindle. I haven't read anything from this author before. I know she read, no she didn't, well she probably did, but she wrote The Year of the Reaper, which was in one of the book subscription boxes a few years ago. That wasn't really my type of book, so I haven't read it and I probably won't. But I've seen the name before, but I've never picked up anything by her. So in this book, which like I said is based on Pacific Islander mythology, there is a tale that a sea dragon egg known as dragon fruit holds the power to grant your like greatest desire, but you don't like make a wish. It's not like a genie lamp. It just sort of knows what you need and it will give you that thing, but it will come at a cost. So we follow Hannah, whose dad stole a dragon egg, And because of this, she is on the run. She has been exiled. She cannot go back to the place that she is from, which is Tamarind. So she spends her days studying sea dragons and learning everything there is to know about them. We also follow Sam, who was a childhood friend of Hanalei, and he is the prince of the kingdom that Hanalei comes from, but he can't inherit the throne because he is male, and in Tamarind it is a matriarchal society, so the women inherit the throne. But his mother has been ill for a very long time and he wants to find a cure. So he is searching for a dragon egg so he can cure his mother. So both of these characters have different reasons for wanting to find the dragon fruit. And I presume they have to come together to help each other out to fulfill their goal. I know that this has a romance in it. I'm going to presume it's between Hanalei and Sam. I am not really a romance book person. And StoryGraph has a feature where it will analyse your reading tastes and then tell you whether it thinks a book will be for you or not. StoryGraph actually said it doesn't think I will enjoy this book because of the romance element. But I'm a bit hit and miss with romance. So when I say I don't like romance, I mean I don't like romance books where that is the genre. So like the, I don't know, beach read, or I cannot think of an example, but those like Ali Hazelwood books and those sorts of things where the sole purpose is romance and there might be other things going around, but the purpose of the book is to be romantic. I don't like those sorts of books. I have liked some, there have been exceptions to the rule, but for the most part, I don't like romance. Whereas I'm not fully against romance being like a plot in a book, as long as the book is about other things. And I would prefer to read a book with no romance in it at all. That is a big ask because it seems every single book that I have ever read has a romance plot, and I always find it completely unnecessary and it just isn't for me. I would much prefer to read a book without any romance. But it seems that the romance is sort of central to the plot, but there's obviously other things going on. There are other purposes and goals. There is the whole dragon egg story. There is the background to these people's lives. So I am hoping that the romance element doesn't put me off because there's more than just romance in it. So currently I am 11% of the way through the book and I am really enjoying it. I'm surprised at how much I'm enjoying it because, like I said, it's not the type of book that I usually pick up, and I think it just goes to show how much I have been limiting myself in terms of what I read. Because as soon as I picked this up, I started with just a couple of pages and then I had to do something else, but I was already wanting to pick the book up again. I was waiting for the next moment to read, which I love that feeling because I've DNF'd quite a few books in December, and because I've read them, I've put them down and then I've just thought, I've got to read that. Whereas this, I'm actually like, yes, when can I pick this up again? So I like books that are equally plot and character driven. I don't like it when one outweighs the other, if it's all character and no plot, or all plot and no character. And so far this seems to have a really good balance. We've learned a lot about the main character and her background and her motivations and who she is as a person. I can really feel her motivations and her feelings and who she is. But the plot is also quite clear, with this person wanting to find the dragon egg and why. So it's a really good balance of both things. So far we haven't met the love interest, we haven't met Sam at all, we are just following Hanalei. And I'm really intrigued about the dragons, which I didn't think I would be, because if I see a book about dragons, I'm like, no, dragons isn't for me. Which is actually bizarre because I love Lord of the Rings, I love Dungeons and Dragons, I love Game of Thrones, and they have dragons in them. So I don't know why I've been like throwing away dragon books when actually it indicates I would like dragons. And that being said, I love Throne of Glass and I really liked the dragon storyline in Throne of Glass. That was my favourite part of Throne of Glass actually, but again, witches. So I thought maybe it was the witchy element, but maybe it's the dragons. Maybe I like dragons, but I'm really enjoying the dragons in this book. I've never read about sea dragons before and I'm really intrigued. You really feel the dragons and they're not just like oh look, there's a dragon. Like there's a lot of interaction with the dragons. There's lots of description about the dragons and I'm really rooting for the dragons. I'm really enjoying the dragon element of this book. So that's where I'm at 11% in and I cannot wait to pick this book up again. I do have a couple of videos to film and edit. I've got a couple of things to do on my day off and I do have to go out later to do a little bit of Christmas shopping. So I can't pick up this book again immediately, but I can't wait, and when I do, I will update you again. Hello again, join me in my kitchen. Excuse the mess, we are Christmas wrapping and I'm also lazy, so yeah, there's mess. So I am around 25% of the way through Dragon Fruit and I am still just as invested in it as I was the last time I updated you. This book has some really like gritty elements. There's some really like dark things that are happening and I like that in a book. I really like darkness. I have always sort of gone for like the eerie darkness, like I said, the witchcraft, the dark magic, like the eerie creepy vibes. This isn't that. This is like people's choices that are really morally corrupt. This is people doing bad things because they are bad people and it being really gritty and nasty. And I really like that. And because this is YA, it's not graphic, there's no like on page violence, it's just talking about what they might do or what they have done in the past. And I really like that element. It gives it high stakes. You realise that the characters in this book are not nice people. Our main character is up against some really bad people. We have just met the love interest for the first time. We have met Sam. His chapters, they're not chapters, it's like split page in a chapter. So you will have like a couple of paragraphs for Hannah and then a couple of paragraphs for Sam and then switch back. So far, I don't know if that will change and we'll get like alternating chapters, but so far they are sharing chapters. I'm not enjoying his parts as much as Hannah. He hasn't got as much depth yet. I'm not really feeling him as a character as of yet. That might change, but so far Sam is a bit meh. Like, I don't understand him the way that I do Hannah, and I'm not as excited about his sections as I am Hannah's. But I am enjoying it and I can't wait to get stuck in and read more. This is a really good book. When I last updated you, I said I was going to go and film a couple of videos. I have not done that. I picked up the book instead, but now I really do need to go and film some videos. So that's what I'm going to do. And when I next get the chance to pick up this book, I will update you. See you soon. Hello. I am just popping in to update you. I am at the halfway mark of A Dragon Fruit. There are some really gruesome things happening on page. Just some like really gritty moments that just literally like make my heart like sink into my stomach. I'm loving it. It's so good. It's very gruesome. I didn't expect it to be gruesome. I thought this was going to be quite like airy and light and just like your typical like adventure, but it is very gruesome. There have also been quite a few hints being dropped about certain characters and I keep highlighting them on my Kindle like, could it mean this? Could this be happening? And I like that. I like it when there are little hints that I can pick up and I can start building a picture in my head of what I think is going on and what I think might happen. So yeah, that is very intriguing. Also, the romance element of this book has started to come into play and surprisingly, I'm not hating it. Like, I'm not loving it. I'm not like, oh my god, yeah, I love it. But I'm not mad about it. It's quite subtle. It's not in your face. It doesn't detract from the storyline. It's just little lines here and there that you can tell that something might be going on between these two. You know, there might be something there, but it's not like really in your face, over the top. So the romance element is actually not bothering me at all. The connection between the two characters, they are actually childhood friends. So the connection isn't being built on page. It's not like, you know, two characters have just met and they have an attraction and that's starting to build. It's already there. There's already a foundation. So there's not a lot that's happening in terms of the romance in the book, other than, like I said, just those little lines here and there where like he calls her beautiful or she's like, oh, don't do this, I'll miss you. Like just those little, they were rubbish examples, but do you know what I mean? Like just those little hints, but it doesn't feel insta-lovey and out of nowhere because there's already a connection. They've known each other previously. They were very close friends. It's a connection that existed that is being built upon. I'm also absolutely loving the sea dragons that they make this book. They are wonderful. I want a pet sea dragon. I love when the sea dragons are on page. I love the descriptions. I love hearing about them. I am really enjoying that element, which I didn't think I would. I thought that's what would put me off this book because, like I said, fantasy and dragons, it's not something that like excites me in a book, but this book is really proving me wrong for a lot of my like misconceptions about what I do and don't like in a book, because all of the things that I said, yeah, I don't like in a book, I'm loving in this book. So yeah, the sea dragons, amazing. I also really love the connection that other characters have with the sea dragons. All of the interactions are really enjoyable. There are some positive, there are some negative, but I'm really loving the connection between the main character and the sea dragons. I have highlighted so many passages in my book of just like, oh my god, I love this interaction, this is great. I'm not gonna spend like 20 minutes telling you about how much I love these sea dragons, but believe me, I love them. So I'm gonna go and do some more reading. I'm really enjoying this book, and I'm so pleased that I'm enjoying this book. I didn't think I would. I thought this was going to be one of those books that either I DNF'd or I just like had to really push through. But I'm excited to pick it up. Like as soon as I put it down, I'm like, when can I next read this? I'm thinking about the book when I'm not reading it. I'm so intrigued to find out what's happening. I'm reading it at like every little snippet, like 5 minutes left on my lunch break, I'm going to read for 5 minutes. Oh, I've got 2 minutes waiting for the kettle to boil, I'm going to get 2 minutes of the book in. So yeah, this book so far, great. So I'm going to read a little bit more and then I will update you a little bit later when I have more to tell you. Bye. Hello again. So I am still reading Dragon Fruit. I am about 75% of the way through and I am still really enjoying it. Nothing has changed on that front since my last update. One thing I really love is the little cliffhangers at the end of chapters. So no like big cliffhangers, but just like, you know, when it just ends on a singular sentence and you're just like, what? Like, and you just immediately want to read the next chapter. This book is full of those. And this book is making me sad. Not like a absolutely sobbing my heart out kind of sad, but just like that little like, oh, kind of sad. And I'm scared at this point in the book, not like horror scared, but just like, how is everything going to resolve itself? Things aren't great. Sad things have happened. Sad things happen throughout this book. There have been lots of moments where I just feel a bit like, oh, I don't know how anything can possibly be resolved at this point. I've got little hints and theories about certain people and things, but the resolution to this story, I am baffled. Everything's just got a bit sad and my heart's done a little blah, and I'm scared. Yeah, I don't see how there can be a happy ending at this point. So I'm intrigued to learn more because surely there will be. That would be the plot twist of the century if like nothing good comes out at the end of this book. I'm really intrigued to read more and find out what on earth is going to happen at this point. And like I just said, I have lots of little theories. I've been making little notes. I know I said in my last part I had theories, but those theories have now grown. I so wish this was a spoiler vlog so I could be like, right guys, this is what I think, but it's not, it's spoiler free, so I can't tell you my theories, but I am hoping I'm right. Currently I'm thinking 4 stars for this book, and it would take something ridiculously bad happening to knock that down. So far this is sitting in the 4-star region. It could go up, it could go down, I doubt it will, but again, that has happened with books I've read in the past. There was one that I was like, this is a 5-star read, and I actually ended up giving it 1 by the end. And that was literally the last few chapters that changed my rating. So it is possible, it could happen, but I don't think it will. This was a little brief update, not much to say because we're really at that point where, you know, we're at the end point, we're 3/4 of the way through. The next like 25% is going to go really fast. It usually does in these kinds of books. So I'm going to speed through it and then I will come back and update you again. Hello. I haven't finished the book, but I just had a couple of thoughts that I wanted to come and add. So this book is not afraid to go to dark places. It's not afraid to make horrible things happen to key characters. And like I said, I really like that. But don't go into this book thinking like this is a really like sunshiny book, because some really like dark things happen in this book. And it isn't afraid to pull punches. It isn't afraid to mess around with the characters and really put them through some stuff. And the other thing that I wanted to say is my theories were correct, and I love it when that happens. It's such a little ego boost when you get something correct in a book. Okay, bye again. Good evening, bookish people. I have just finished Dragon Fruit and I am gonna give it a 4.5 stars, which is insane because like I have said, I did not think this book was going to be for me. So the fact that this got 4.5 stars is a groundbreaking moment. This is making me reevaluate everything that I know about books and my reading tastes, which is great. That's what I wanted this year to be. I really wanted this to be the year of picking things up out of my comfort zone and finding new parts of fiction that I love. So I'm so pleased that this book has done that for me. So 4.5 stars is great. I have no criticisms. There is nothing for me to criticize about this book, and I will, like, obviously in a couple of minutes go into a little bit more depth about this book, but the only reason it's not 5 stars is because it didn't tick all of my personal boxes of what I love in a book. But obviously that's not going to be the case for everybody. We've all got the things that make books like perfect to us. It's not anything wrong with that book, it just doesn't fit into my personal favourite box, if that makes sense. So yeah, the 4.5 isn't oh, this book could be better, because genuinely I don't think it could. So I wanted to touch on the romance element of this book, because that is the thing that StoryGraph predicted I would not enjoy. It gives a little AI generated analysis on your reading tastes and this book, and it was saying, oh, you know, you might like the magic and the setting, but it's romance, so this book probably isn't for you. So I went into this book thinking, oh, well, I'm not going to enjoy the romance, but there was no romance, let's be real. The romance part of this plot was practically non-existent. It was literally like an inch out of the mile-long book that this is. Like, it's just, it really wasn't a factor at all. It's so brief, and it has no impact on the plot at all. It's just they develop a romantic connection, but nothing really comes of it. It's not explored. There's not loads and loads of sections of the book dedicated to the romance. It's literally throwaway lines here and there about their connection, and that is it. It's literally minimal romance in this book. I'm really surprised by that, because like I said, StoryGraph was saying this is a romance book, and it is not at all. So don't go into this book thinking this is a fantasy romance or it has a heavy romance plot, because it does not at all. The characters in this book were really well written. They had a lot of depth to them, they had a lot of personality, and they also had flaws. They weren't just like one-dimensional characters. There was a lot to them, which makes it really easy to follow this book, because you're invested, you know who you're reading about, you feel connected to what you're reading on page. The writing was also amazing. It wasn't complex at all, it wasn't over the top, it wasn't flowery or difficult. It was a very easy read, which is great because it means it's a really accessible read. No ridiculously long words, it's not all convoluted or overly descriptive or flowery. It's very to the point, but not to the point where it's like, oh, this is dull and lifeless and boring to read. It was just that sweet spot, and I think this is what makes the book great to read, because it is just an easy read. There's no point where I'm like, oh, I needed to reread that because it's throwing too much information at me, or I didn't really understand what it was implying. It's very straight to the point, but in a good way. The plot was also great. There was a lot of intrigue, and it was very well paced. It wasn't quite fast paced, but I'd say it was like medium to fast. It wasn't slow at all. There weren't any sections where I was bored. It was constantly moving. Things were always happening. There were lots of obstacles. There were clear motivations. I knew what was going to happen next. Not in a like I can predict it, but it was very clear at saying, this is what's happening, then this is what's happening, then this is what's happening. But then obstacles would obviously be thrown in the way to divert us somewhere else or to present a challenge. But it was, I think that's what contributed to it being an easy read. It was very clear formatted. It wasn't like, I don't know what's going on, I don't know what's happening next. It followed a very clear structure, and that was good to me. That was a very good thing. There were some shocking There were some shocking moments, but there were also some really wholesome moments. It had a very good mix of both. It wasn't all dark, but it wasn't all like lovely. There was a really good mix of the two. At one point I wrote a little note on my phone and it said, oh, this book is so magical, and then 2 minutes later I wrote another note and it was like, oh, this book is so sad. It really does have a mix, and it keeps you feeling, it keeps you on your toes. At one point you're like, oh, this is so lovely, I love this, and then 2 pages later you're like, oh my god, did that just happen? It's very good at keeping moving, things constantly happening, making you feel. This book does have dark themes, like I've said. I would recommend the trigger warnings, because there were some things in this that I think could actually really affect some people. And I don't mean dark as in like things that happen to us in real life that may like trigger a memory, but there are just some themes and things that are spoken about that I personally like. And I don't say like as in, oh, I love it when that specific thing happens, but I like it when there is something dark and twisty and it makes you go, oh, I like that feeling in a book. So for me, it didn't bother me, but there were some parts that I think actually might really trigger certain people. So I would definitely check out the content warnings before going into this book. But there was nothing on page. Well, there was some things on page, but there wasn't a lot on page. It's not graphic, it's not anything like that. It's just the implications that sort of tug at your heartstrings a little bit and, you know, go to dark places. So overall, this has been a really, really great start to the vlog. I'm really, really pleased with how this has gone, and I'm looking forward to picking up things from this author again. I'm so glad that this book has put me in my place and said, you know nothing, Jon Snow. So yeah, super, super chuffed. And yeah, that is the end of the first section of this vlog. So next I am actually going to do a review. Like I said, I have already read The Invocations by Crystal Sutherland. So I am going to do a little sit down review, very brief, probably like 5-10 minutes at the most, just talking about the book and going over my thoughts and feelings on it. And then I will pick up the next read, which is The Poisons We Drink by Bethany Babb. Hello. So in this section of the blog, I am going to be doing a little review for The Invocations. This was nominated in the YA Fantasy category for the GoodReads Choice Awards, but I have already read it. I read it back in October, so it just makes sense to do a little review in this video. So going into this book, I was a little bit hesitant because I didn't know if it was going to live up to my expectations. The previous book by this author is one of my all-time favourite books, The House of Hollow, and seeing as I loved that book so much, this kind of had a lot to live up to, and I wanted it to be on a similar vibe. I wanted to get the same enjoyment from this book as I did from House of Hollow. But if I'm being completely honest, it didn't live up to my expectations. So in this book, we follow multiple characters. The first is Zara Jones, whose sister Savannah has been killed by a magical occult serial killer, and Zara wants to find who is responsible, but also raise her sister from the dead. The second character we follow is Jude Wolfe. She is the daughter of a billionaire, but she has been shunned from the family. She has been disowned, but they do not know that Jude is actually living with a demon tethered to her soul, who is slowly and painfully killing her. And then we have Emma Byrne, and she is the solution to Zara and Jude's problems. She is a witch that sells spells to people in need. But horrifically for Emma, the serial killer is actually targeting her customers, the people she has sold spells to. So the three must work together to find the serial killer and find the answer to each one of their problems. So this is a dark YA fantasy. It has a sapphic romance and also a mystery element. It has a female-only magic system and it includes death magic. There's also complex family dynamics and morally ambiguous characters. So I actually gave this book 3 stars, which is nothing compared to the 5 stars that I gave its predecessor, House of Hollow. The first problem that I had with this book is that there were lots of characters to follow, and although there were only 3, each one of them had their own characters involved in their lives that we also had to learn the name of and get to know the dynamics. So Zara had her sister, Jude had her family, Emma also had people connected to her. And because there were so many characters in this book and we were swapping from perspectives so often, I just didn't feel connected to any of them. None of them seemed to have their own voice. None of them seemed to be really fleshed out. There were points in the book where I didn't know whose chapter we were following and I had to go back and reread bits to try and figure out who I was reading at that point. The plot was also quite slow. This was quite a slow-paced book. It took a while for anything to happen, and then when something did happen, it all just kind of happened at once. We have established in my previous videos that I am not a fan of romance books. This had a romance element in it, but I was quite disappointed because it's a sapphic romance, which I really enjoy reading, but there just seemed to be no foundations. It seemed a bit forced. Like I didn't really understand where it came from or how it developed. It was just suddenly there. I also felt no emotional pull to this book. So when I put it down or I wasn't listening to the audiobook, I wasn't thinking about it. I wasn't itching to pick it back up. It was just sort of a, oh, well, I could read now. I've got some spare time, so I'll just read that book that I'm in the middle of. There was no drive to continue this story. I will say I did get quite annoyed at myself at the 75% mark when we got lots of answers because I didn't actually see it coming. I am quite annoyed because it was incredibly obvious, and especially for someone who's read a lot of supernatural themed books, I really should have seen it coming. It could just be the fact that I completely missed the signs, but then it also could be the fact that I wasn't invested in the book enough to notice them. I have to be completely honest and say that I didn't go into this book because I was interested or enjoyed the blurb. I went into it because the author wrote House of Hollow. So that might have skewed my experience, whereas if this was a book that I had seen on a shelf and I was really desperate to pick it up because it seemed exciting or it appealed to me, then maybe I would have had a different time reading it. But because I went into it with high expectations and comparing it to the author's last book, that probably had more of an impact on my enjoyment. So I wouldn't say definitely don't pick up this book, it's no good, because I don't feel like that at all. I do think a lot of my disappointment comes from the fact that House of Hollow was a 5-star read for me. It's one of my all-time favourites. If you ask me what my favourite book is, that is probably what I would say. And I'm always looking for House of Hollow vibes in other books. I'm constantly comparing the books that I read to it and going, oh, did it give me that House of Hollow vibe? So this book really had a lot to live up to. Is it its fault that it didn't live up to that book? No, because it's not the same book. And just because it's the same author, that doesn't mean she can't do different things or explore different genres or go for a different vibe. So I'm not saying this is a bad book, don't read it. This is like the worst thing I've ever read. I just think I didn't have a good experience with it. So like I said, I gave this 3 stars, and I have gone back through my Goodreads list and looked at other witchy books that I gave 3 stars, so I can kind of give you some suggestions, because obviously this one wasn't for me, but I have other books that weren't for me that were sort of on a similar vibe. So maybe if you read those books, and enjoyed them, then this one might be for you. And similarly, if you read this book and enjoyed it, then these ones might be for you. So the first one is These Witches Don't Burn. The second is Blood Like Magic. And the third is The Ravens. I'm not going to go into depth on what they are about because that's not what this video is, but if you are interested, then go and check those ones out. So let me know your thoughts on this book. Have you read it? And if so, did you enjoy it, or did you have similar feelings to me about this book? Also, let me know if you've read House of Hollow and what your views were. I find it really interesting to see if you have read both and which one you preferred. So yeah, let me know down in the comments. Why would you sneeze as soon as I press record? Hello, so the next book I am going to be reading in this vlog is The Poisons We Drink by Bethany Baptiste. This is actually a debut novel, which I think is absolutely amazing that she has been nominated for a Goodreads Choice Awards with her first ever book. So this book is all about Venus, and Venus brews illegal love potions to support her family, I'm presuming financially. But when Venus's mother is killed, the Grand Witcher, who is the head of a powerful coven, offers her an opportunity. He offers her the chance to punish the killer, but in exchange, she must make deadly potions that are designed to enslave America's political participants. So the rich and the powerful and those embroiled in American politics. As Venus gets more and more involved in the seedy goings on in the political world, the line between magic and power starts to blur, and she isn't sure who to trust, and that includes herself. StoryGraph predicts that I'm going to like this one based on the witchy magic and the fact that there is a LGBTQIA+ romance in this book, which isn't actually mentioned anywhere in the blurb. But the political element is what puts me off. And I'm also quite unsure with contemporary settings. Like magic that is linked to the real world, sometimes I don't enjoy that. So I am a little bit hesitant with this book. And although StoryGraph thinks I will like this one, StoryGraph thought I wouldn't like the previous book, and I did. So now I'm kind of worried that it's gonna think that I'm gonna like this book and I actually won't. I absolutely love the dedication of this book. It says, I dedicate this book to all of my haters. I only got this far out of spite. Love that. This book also starts with a content warning, which I really appreciate. I personally don't look at content warnings, but I know a lot of people do, so they'll really appreciate that in this book, I think. So this book actually starts with a letter from the author, which I have just read, and that has completely changed my expectations going into this book. Previously, the political and contemporary setting put me off, but actually I have just read that this book is based on the author's own feelings and opinions on the 2016 election and the impact that that had on lots of different communities, specifically the Black community from this author's point of view. And now I'm interested. And she's also talking about her rage and her pain and the grief that she felt, and I feel like that is going to come through in this book. That is what has inspired her to write this book. She is using that real life experience to fuel her novel, and now I am actually intrigued. I fully scrap everything I just said because I was imagining it to be like a fantasy political world, but if I can draw on reality from that and the fact that it is witches versus the, I was going to put too much opinion in. No, I'm just going to say it. The shitty men that are in charge in America. I actually think I'm going to enjoy reading this. I am a little bit hesitant of if I actually don't enjoy this book. I don't want that to seem a criticism on the author's own experience, because she is clearly drawing from something that I cannot understand. I'm not American, I am not Black. I do not understand what people actually are going through and have been through in that regard. So I'm now also just a little bit nervous because I don't want to disrespect that opinion or that experience, because how can I judge what is accurate or whatever when I have not experienced it? But yeah, now I am actually really excited to pick up this book. So yeah, I'm just gonna dive right in and let's see how we get on. I will update you once I have read the bulk of the book. I usually try and update every 25%, so I will see you somewhere in between now and 25%. Bye. Yeah. Hello everyone, I hope you are having a really lovely day. It's currently Boxing Day. I had a really magical day yesterday and I hope you did too. But right now I am filming the update that I really didn't want to make because I have actually DNF'd the poisons we drink. So although my initial reservations were about the genre and the theme, the thing that actually caused me to DNF was the writing style. It really didn't work for me at all. The first thing that put me off was in the first 10 pages or so when we were introduced to a lot of characters and I didn't really understand their relevance or who they were, if I was supposed to remember them, if they were throwaway characters, if they were significant. I just got a little bit confused by all of the people that we were meeting, and it just really took me out of the story trying to remember who was who. Then the next thing was the outfit descriptions. I know this is personal preference, but I really don't enjoy outfit descriptions in books when it's just sort of plopped in the middle of a paragraph. And it seems quite random. Like all of a sudden they'll just be like, and they were wearing this and this is their hair colour. And to me it takes it out because it doesn't feel linked to anything. It's just a description that's being randomly given. And I find that I don't care. I don't care if the main character's wearing red shoes or if her mum has purple hair. Like, it doesn't matter to me. I much prefer it in books that if you want to let me know those things, it's done in a much better way when it's sort of linked to other things. Like, for example, if you were trying to tell me that someone's jeans were ripped, I would much prefer it if it said, oh, such and such was a really clumsy character. You could tell this by the rips in their jeans, like that kind of thing. So it's being tied into other things. Whereas this literally was just a paragraph of outfits and appearance description seemingly out of nowhere. It just really takes me out because I'm getting to know a character, I'm reading some dialogue or I'm understanding something, and then there's just an outfit description in the middle of it. It just really takes me out of it. So again, I suppose that isn't a criticism, it's just something I personally don't enjoy in a book. This book is set in modern day America, but it has a unique magic system with a lot of political context. next. In this world, we have witches, who are the magic users, and they are discriminated against, and there are lots of laws, there are lots of rules, there are lots of things going on, and we are told those things. There's just so much information about these rules and these laws and these activism groups just being given to us, and I find I really have to focus to try and like figure out what's going on, and it's taking me away from the story. So for example, she'd be having a conversation with someone and then she'd be like, oh, that directly goes against rule 12, and then it would go into what rule 12 was. But I was then being like, okay, so this is rule 12, and then maybe a couple of pages later it then talk about a different rule, and I'm trying to remember all of this stuff. It's like reading a textbook. I'm just taking in so much information that is brand new to me because this author has created this magic system and this world, and I'm just not finding it enjoyable. And there are so many different types of magic, so it's talking about different potions and different purposes and different rules. There's all these different activism groups with acronyms, so that one of them I think was called SWIG, which stood for something, and then there was another one and it was talking about these like activism figures. And the activism, it's also not just for the magic users, it's also against. So there's like two different sides that we're having to remember, and it would say, oh, 20 years ago this law came into place that stopped this, and there's just so much information because it is building a brand new world, but I just didn't enjoy it. I wasn't getting into the story because my brain was trying to hold all of this new information. So again, that's not a criticism of the book, it's just I don't enjoy books like that. My brain doesn't want to hold all of this new information. Whereas somebody who likes that sort of thing and finds that enjoyable to read, that wouldn't be an issue for them. Just personally, it doesn't work for me. The sections that I read were also very dialogue heavy, and that is another thing I don't enjoy in my books. And it seemed a lot of the dialogue was unnecessary. It was a lot of just filler conversations, didn't seem relevant to the progression of the plot. Just like, oh yeah, that's our cousin, he sleeps a lot. Oh, well, this happened, and oh, it's just like so much back and forth. And I just don't like that in a book. I found myself like skimming over the conversations because it would be a whole page of a conversation and I'd think, I don't care. So I'd just skim over it, and then I'd be like, oh, but something in that conversation might be relevant, and if I've skipped over it, then I'm going to miss something. So then I'd go back and read it, and I found myself not enjoying reading it, and that really soured my reading experience because I didn't want to read what was on the page, but I was having to make sure I wasn't missing anything. So then you're just kind of like bored because you're reading something you don't want to read. So it was about at 6% that the idea formed in my head to DNF this, which is quite early. I can be quite a quick DNFer, but I wanted to give it more of a chance. I thought 6% is a little bit too early to be able to say, no, this definitely isn't for me. So I decided to give it more of a chance. And I set myself a goal of at least 25%. And if I still felt the same and I wasn't enjoying it at 25%, then I would put it down. Because I don't want to force myself to read books just for these videos, because then it's not an authentic reading experience. I read for enjoyment, I read as a hobby, it's not just for content. So although yes, I would have more to talk about in this video if I had finished it, that's not the kind of reader that I want to be. That's not the kind of YouTuber I want to be. I want to be honest, and my honest thought is this book wasn't for me. Oh, my Shein order has been shipped. Whenever I had to put this book down, I found myself not wanting to pick it back up. It would be like, oh, okay, it's time to read now, or oh, well, I've got like some time, I may as well read. There wasn't that pull. Whereas the last book I read, Dragon Fruit, I really felt, oh, I can't wait to pick up that book again, or when have I got some time to pick it up. It just didn't get that at all with this. It was oh, okay, well, I best read it now. So for me, that's a clear sign I should DNF, because if I'm not looking forward to the book and it's feeling a little bit like a chore to read it, then it's not for me. And then it doesn't feel fair on the author either, because at the end of it, I'm still going to give it a negative review, whether I've read all of it or a little bit of it. And it just doesn't seem fair to put all of that time into something that someone has put a lot of their heart and soul into. Like, writing a book takes a lot of time and effort and energy and vulnerability, and whether you enjoy that book or not, it's still an impressive achievement to publish a book. And it just doesn't seem fair for a book to not be for me and not something I personally enjoy. People are like, oh, well, I'm going to finish it so I can give it a review for my content, and it's like, that's not what books are for. That's not what they were published for. It just doesn't seem fair to me. So I was sure quite early on that I wasn't going to finish this book, but like I said, I wanted to at least get to a far enough point that I could say, well, at least I gave it a good try. I I got a quarter of the way through the book. That is a good chunky amount. I can fairly say with certainty that this book isn't for me. One thing I did enjoy actually was when we were introduced to who I presume is going to become the love interest. They use they, them pronouns, but we weren't told why. I don't know if further in the book there is some sort of context behind that, but at the 25% mark there definitely isn't, and I quite liked that it's just a sort of form of acceptance to not explain why somebody uses these pronouns. It didn't say, oh, this person is non-binary or this person is gender fluid. It's just those pronouns are used and that's it. And that's personally how I believe it should be. Nobody owes anyone an explanation to why their pronouns are the way that they are. Just the same that if somebody's pronouns were she, her, but they weren't the pronouns that they were born with, you don't have to preface that with, oh, but they're trans. They just are she. That's just how it is. So I just liked the fact that there was no other context. It's just this person uses they, them pronouns and that's it. That's all you're getting. That's all you deserve. So I really appreciated that. Oh, another thing about the dialogue that I didn't like was the swearing. And this is in third person. And a lot of it was like, oh, such and such did this, like they didn't give a flute, or yeah, she did that with effing badass energy. Like, it's just using swear words as descriptive words. I don't enjoy that. I don't mind if a character swears in dialogue, because people do that. People swear in conversations, or if it's in first person and that's someone's thoughts, because I have that sometimes. Like, I'll look at something and I'll be like, oh, what the F? But when it's in third person and swear words are just added into sentences that aren't actually being said by anybody, it really, really puts me off. I just don't enjoy swearing in books. But again, that's personal preference. There were actually a couple of quotes about grief that I really enjoyed. I've highlighted them and made a note of them because I thought they were quite nice and felt relatable, and I think if anyone's experienced grief, they could relate to it. So I noted these down. I'll read them to you, but that was one thing that I did like about this book. So it said, death changes something in you, you die in a way. It sours any of your sweetness, it paints your heart black. And then a few sentences later, it says, accept that you're not the person you were, but don't pity yourself. Self-pity doesn't turn back time. That's like being trapped in a cage while life goes on. I liked that. I thought it was well said. I thought it was relatable. It just highlights that this book is coming from someone who has experienced grief, and I'm a big believer that grief doesn't just have to be death. There are lots of different things you can grieve, and there's lots of different times you can experience grief. I relate to this from a death perspective, but I just think the author clearly knew what it was like to grieve and put that in really good words. So those were the aspects of the book that contributed to me not enjoying it. And like I've said a few times, but I just want to reiterate, I don't think this is a bad book at all. I don't think this is poorly written. I just think the writing style isn't for me. And that's nobody's fault. People have different preferences. Not every book can be for every person. But I just think it's a shame because, as you saw in my introduction in my last clip, I had quite a bit of excitement towards this book because of the political elements, which originally put me off. But then when I saw it tied into the witchcraft and the contemporary setting, I got quite excited. But actually going into it, the writing style just was not for me. So in the end, I got just over 100 pages and DNF'd just before the 25% mark. So far, I think it's fair to say that Dragon Fruit is winning in this video, but there is still one more book to go and I have high hopes for that. Also, I did want to mention as well that this book is around 480 pages, which again contributed to the reason why I DNF'd it, because obviously I was comparing the books that I have read or discussed in this video so far, and I didn't enjoy The Invocations, but I didn't DNF it, and I was thinking, well, why didn't I DNF it? But actually it's much shorter than this book. It's around the 330 page mark, The Invocations is. So I think there is something to be said about the length, because maybe if this was 300 pages, I might have finished it, because obviously it takes less time and energy to finish a shorter book, whereas this being almost 500 pages, you have to put a lot of commitment into finishing that book, and if you're already not enjoying it early on, you're just committing to a struggle. Whereas if this was a lot shorter, the 25% mark would have been closer to the halfway mark, therefore there's not that much longer to go before you finished it. So I do think that has contributed. If this was shorter, it may not have been a DNF, but then on the flip, if The Invocations had been longer, that might have been a DNF. So I don't think the fact that I DNF'd this one and not The Invocations shows that one was better than the other. I think it can be attributed to the length of both books. So I was thinking about the similarities between this book and some others. I do actually make graphics when I have finished a book and post them on Instagram, and I recommend a few books that have given me similar vibes. And the first one that I thought was Legendborn, because of the complex magic system, like the unique complex magic system, but also because that one was long and I didn't enjoy it, but it was very hyped. And then the other one was Flower Heart, which I did actually enjoy that book, but the sentient magic element, it immediately made me think of Flower Heart. Obviously I won't go too much into that because I don't want to spoil either book, but if you enjoyed the sentient magic vibes in either of those books, then maybe pick up the other one to see if you enjoy it too. And let me know, I would love to know what your thoughts were on this book and Legendborn and Flower Heart. Let me know if you think that's a fair recommendation or if I've completely missed the mark with that. I'm definitely glad I gave this book a go. It has reaffirmed my belief that contemporary fantasy is not for me, but I still haven't lost hope. I'm still going to give some others a try because, again, this was down to the writing style rather than the content of the book, so I don't think it's fair to completely dismiss contemporary fantasy yet. Is it actually called contemporary fantasy? I've not actually heard anyone call anything a contemporary fantasy. So what actually is this genre? Is it like urban magic? An urban fantasy? Magical realism? What would you call it? I'm not sure. But yeah, let me know. This one doesn't get a rating because I DNF'd before the 50% mark, so I can't tell you my stars because it obviously was a DNF. If I'd got over the 50% mark, then I would have given it a rating because I've read enough of it to feel like that is justified. And then I do also add it to my Goodreads read if I've got over 50% before DNFing, but obviously didn't with this one, so it gets no rating and it doesn't get marked as read on Goodreads or StoryGraph. I do not think I will pick up another book by this author because of the writing style, but I still think it needs to be acknowledged that this is a debut and it is a fantastic achievement to be nominated for a Goodreads Choice Awards with your debut novel. So despite the fact that I didn't enjoy this, I still think that is absolutely amazing. But unless she drastically changes her writing style, I can't see why I would enjoy a different book over this one from her. Anyway, let's shelve this now, not literally. Let's park this book, finish this section and move on to the next book. So I will see you again in another clip when I am ready to talk about Don't Let the Forest. So we are on to the last book of this video, and this is the book that I am the most excited about. This is Don't Let the Forest In by C.G. Drews, and it's a queer horror fantasy. The author describes this as forest rot with horrible boys who are obsessed with each other, and if that doesn't sound like my cup of tea, I don't know what does. I love books that have a botanical, rotting, dead, planty forest vibe. And I mean, you can tell by the channel name, The Book Forest, that books that feature forests and plants are my absolute MO. And when you pair that with like the rotting, decaying thing, I just love it. A lot of people will describe it as cottagecore, so it's the beautiful botanical planty magic of cottagecore, but then make it dark and eerie and twisted. That's how you get cottagecore. I cannot wait to get stuck into this book. So some of the buzzwords and phrases that I have seen used to describe this book are unsettling, dark, mysterious. It has themes of grief, queer and asexuality representation, mental health representation. It has been described as a psychological horror, which is my favourite type of horror in both books and films. And it features forests/woods, which might not be a buzzword for some people, but it makes it an absolute must-buy for me. So this book follows Andrew and Thomas, who both attend the same boarding school along with Andrew's sister Dove. Andrew writes dark, twisted fairy tales, and then Thomas interprets these in his artwork. The two are best friends and they are never seen without each other. But at the start of this book, in a new year at boarding school, Thomas is really distant and Andrew notices that there is blood on his sleeve. Desperate to keep his only friend close, Andrew follows him into the forest that surrounds the boarding school one night and sees Thomas fighting the monsters from his drawings. The pair fight the monsters together, but as the boys grow closer, the monsters grow stronger. And Andrew begins to fear that the only way to get rid of these monsters once and for all is to destroy their creator. When I first read the blurb blurb, it gave me the Hazelwood vibes, but make it gay. But it also made me think of The After Dark by E. Latimer, which is a book coming out in January. I spoke about it in my January releases video, which I will link up there. With it not having been released yet, I can't compare it in terms of content, but the blurbs are very similar. They're both queer, they both follow boarding school students and a really horrific forest that surrounds the school. So they are giving me really similar vibes, and I cannot wait to pick up The After Dark, but obviously that's not going to happen for a while. So this book, it's gay, it's dark, it's eerie, it has a forest in it, it has everything that I need for it to be a 5-star read. But let's just dive in and actually find out my thoughts. Hello fellow book lovers. I last spoke to you on Thursday and it is now Sunday. I absolutely devoured this book. I think it's more fair to say this book devoured me. I like to try and update you every quarter, or at least when something significant happens in the book, and that way you can see how my thoughts progress and if my opinion changes at all. But I read the bulk of this Friday evening into Saturday morning, finishing at 2 a.m. I had a really lovely weekend with my family and I didn't want to take any time out of that to film because family comes first and vlogs can wait. But now I have a bit of time, so I will recap my thoughts and my notes with you now. Also, can I just say that I have just had a shower and washed my hair, and my eyelashes and makeup have held up really well in the shower. I'm impressed. So when I started this, my first thought was how beautiful and poetic the writing was. I absolutely love that in a book. I know that some people don't, they find it a bit too flowery or purple prosy, but personally I love that in a book and it just felt so magical to read. I have made a note on my laptop of just one of the quotes. It's no spoilers or anything, but just to give you an example of the type of writing that I mean. Dove was a statue of glittering ice, beautiful and dangerous and impossible to reshape, while Andrew was more like a collection of skeleton leaves, fragile and crumbling. I don't know, I just love writing like that. It's just so beautiful to me. The horror element in this was really creepy. Not scary, but really unnerving and uncomfortable to read in the dark. This book was very fast paced. The plot was constantly moving and something was always happening and developing. There was a constant feeling of dread draped over this book, and it completely kept me hooked, always wanting to read more, wanting to read on, wanting to stick with the book to find out how this concluded. And that really helped the pace because there was never a lull. There was never a point in the book where I was like, I'm a bit bored. There was nothing boring about this book. It was constantly moving, constantly tense. The pacing was really fast and I loved it. The 50% mark was when things really amped up and we got like a really big scene, lots of things happening. And I did start to get a bit nervous because I would have expected that to happen maybe a bit later in the book, but because it happened so soon, I got a bit nervous that things would then start to slow down because they'd got, if you think of that like stereotypical story mountain that we all do in year 4, where you have the climax and then everything calms down, I was worried that because a big climactic moment happened right in the middle, that was going to be the peak and it was gonna slow down. But actually all that happened is it just continued to climb. The stakes just got higher, it got more tense, more chaotic. As I said, there was never a lull in this book. I've said before in this video and in previous videos that I am not a fan of romance, but this one had me in a chokehold. I was completely invested in the romance and the feelings of the characters. I was constantly wanting something to happen. I was wanting our main character Andrew to say how he was feeling. I was really rooting for this. And then there was a moment where a conversation happened and I was so into it. There was also asexuality rep in this book and I really enjoyed that. I think it was done really well because a lot of it was the characters coming to terms with their asexuality and explaining it to other people and trying to figure it out because they weren't happy about this element. They were not proud. They were not celebrating this part of them. They saw it as a weakness. They saw it as a flaw. And I think it was very well explained from that character's point of view to other characters. I do believe that the author themselves is asexual, so they have a very good understanding of what it is like. And sometimes I find in books where the author is using their own experience in their book that often it's done badly. And I don't mean in a, oh, well, they don't understand what they're talking about, but because they understand it so well, they're not great at portraying that to people who don't know. But there was no point in this book where I felt that. I felt like they were explaining it to somebody who didn't understand. And I know a bit about asexuality. I've looked into it a lot, but I didn't feel patronized by this author's explanation, but nor did I feel overwhelmed because they understand it so well. I feel like I rambled on a bit there, but I hope you know what I'm saying. I absolutely fell in love with the characters in this book, and I think that's why I enjoyed the romance element, because I cared about them. Whereas going into a soul romance book, I have to care about the romance before I care about the characters in order to pick up the book. But because I don't care about romance, I'm not going to pick up the book. Whereas because I loved these characters and I was invested in them, therefore I cared. I had a feeling of dread every time something bad was happening for these characters. I was feeling their feelings, I felt their pain, I felt their happiness, I felt their fear. I was so connected to these characters. They are so well fleshed out, and I felt like I really understood them. I understood their motivations, I understood their flaws, I understood who they are and what they want, and I love that in a book. I'm very character driven. If I feel connected to the main character, I could probably overlook every flaw in the plot. I think I made a note at one point and it said that these boys could dress up in pink tutus and turn into fairies and fix everything with a magic wand, and I would still give it 5 stars. I was just so invested in these boys and their lives and their well-being, and that's not just because they were great characters, it's because they were written so well and the author made me feel something, and that is what I seek in a book. That is what I yearn for. So it was around the 75% mark when I became certain that this was going to be a 5-star read, and like I said before, it would have taken something drastic, like an entire tone change, for that to be lowered. It really would have had to become a completely different book altogether for me to lower that from 5 stars, because it made me feel, it made me invested, it made me care. So realistically, this plot could have just, I could have got to the end and been like, wait, hang on, that doesn't make sense, and I still would have loved it, because I felt this book in my soul. I'm not even being dramatic. This book had me, I can't even speak. I want to read you a text that I sent to my partner while I was reading this, because I think it just sums up exactly what I was just trying to say. I put, books like this are why I read, books that turn your whole life upside down while you're reading and make you feel and hurt and cry and smile and just get completely lost in the magic and chaos. I think that sums up how I felt about this book. In the last 25%, I wrote a little note to myself on my phone just saying I am sobbing with crying emojis. This book made me sob, and that is another reason why it was bound to be 5 stars, because if a book makes me cry, then a book has got under my skin. I have felt something, I am connected. I don't cry at anything, I don't just sob, I have to really feel. And I knew this book was going to get under my skin, and I knew it was just going to twist my heart, but I didn't think I was going to cry. The last maybe 10-15%, I was sobbing, then I stopped, and then I just sobbed again. It was such a wild ride, and I loved every single second of it. At the time of filming this, there are only a few days left of 2024, and this book has shot up to the top of my best reads of 2024 list, obliterated everything else that I have read this year, and nestled comfortably in my best books of all time list. This book is my soulmate. We are completely intertwined, and you can expect me to talk about this book in many, many more videos to come. I genuinely did start to fear that my next read, I would just DNF, because nothing would ever compare to this book. Although, spoilers for a future video, I have actually started my next read and I really am enjoying it. So clearly this book has not, why am I doing this? Clearly this book has not ruined every other book for me. There is still room in my heart for others, but yeah, this really did have an impact on me. This author has another book coming out this year, and it seems to follow very similar vibes. The author has described it as very similar, like cottagecore, creepy, dark. And part of me does worry a little bit that this is going to turn out to be a House of Hollow versus The Invocations, where I absolutely loved one book and then the next one I pick up, I'm going to be comparing, and it's just inevitably going to fall flat. But from looking at the author's synopsis, they are very, very similar, so I think I will enjoy the vibes. And seeing as I like the writing style so much, I don't think I could ever not enjoy a book by this author. We will see though, because I am going to pre-order that as soon as it's available. It's coming out like late 2025, I think, so it might be available to pre-order in hardback, but I'm not sure about Kindle. I don't think I saw it available to pre-order on Kindle, but if it is, I will obviously get it to me, Gillian, read it on release day and then film it, and you will see me cry in real time, because I guarantee it's gonna make me cry. Let me know if you have read this book, and was your experience the same as mine, or do you think I am a mad woman with how much I have gushed about this book? Please let me know. And if you have read this book and can recommend some similar books with that creepy botanical rotten forest vibe, please, I beg of you, let me know, because that is my absolute vibe. I need more of that in my life. My happiness depends on it. No pressure. So I think we can quite fairly say that Don't Let the Forest In is the winner in terms of rating from this vlog. It was the only 5 stars. I have called it my soulmate. It is just a point blank fact that this is the winner of the vlog in terms of ratings and favourite. But I am going to throw a curveball and say I'm not going to give Don't Let the Forest In the crown of this vlog, because the point of this vlog is to pick up new reads and to explore new genres and read the books that other people have said were great that I might not necessarily have picked up. And that doesn't apply to Don't Let the Forest In, because I already owned it before I had the idea for this video. I have had it maybe since around October. It has just been sat on my TBR waiting for me to get to it. So this book was going to be read anyway, and I knew I was going to love it. I bought it because I knew I was going to love it. Obviously I didn't know about the writing style, and I didn't know I was going to love the characters, but the blurb is exactly what I look for in a book. So it was highly likely that this book was going to be my cup of tea. Whereas the other books, they are wild cards for me. They were a bit of a risk in terms of not fitting into the pattern that I follow with books. So I have to give the crown to Dragonfruit. If it was not for the fact that I want to challenge myself to pick up different books this year, I wouldn't have picked it up. It's not something I would ever gravitate towards. It's not something I would ever assume that I would like. I gave it a go quite hesitantly and loved it. I really enjoyed the book. Therefore, is that not the winner of this vlog? Because it has proven to me that other books are worth a try, and other people and things like the GoodReads Awards and the bestsellers, there may be something behind those, that I am not superior in my knowledge of books, and maybe other people know things and I should listen. Just kidding, I would never do that. But I think it just goes to show that I have been missing out on potential favourites and enjoyable reads because I have been limiting myself. Because for example, Don't Let the Forest In, I inevitably would have read that regardless of this video or whether it was voted on the Goodreads lists or not. That was always going to end up on my TBR. That was always gonna be something I read. Whereas Dragonfruit, I wouldn't. And now that I have, it has really made me think and made me open to picking up books that aren't necessarily on my radar and listening to other people's recommendations. I think this is gonna be such an interesting year of reads. I think I'm gonna now just pick up everything and anything, and we are gonna go on such a wild ride together, because some of these are gonna be like DNFs, books that I've always said I would never read this. I think I will read and think, yeah, no, this isn't for me. But I think we are gonna discover some gems, and I am just gonna end this year with my mind blown of all these things that I have been skipping and ignoring that are actually truly wonderful books. So yeah, please subscribe to see this mind-blowing journey play out in real time, because I am so excited about this reading year. Although you're watching this in January, for me it's still 2024 at the time of filming. So I am just so ready for the new year to start on my reading tracker, to start buying new books, to start all these reading vlogs. It is just going to be such a wonderful wear. It's going to be a wonderful year, guys. It's going to be a wonderful year, and I am so ready for it. So we have had a 5-star read, a 4-star read, a review of a 3-star read, and a DNF. That is a very mixed bag. I think this has been a successful vlog. Let me know down below what you think. Let me know which book that you enjoyed the most from this video. Let me know what nominee from the YA Fantasy Goodreads Awards has been your favourite. What did you vote for? I'm going to tell you a secret. I voted for You Let the Forest In, even though I hadn't read it, but I knew I was going to love it. I just knew it. Don't tell anyone, don't shout at me. Please subscribe to see the next instalment of this series, because like I said, I am going to try and read all of the YA fantasy and some of the adult and the mystery and the romance. I'm going to try and read a little bit from all of the sections. So if you would like to see those videos, and then obviously part 2 of the YA fantasy, then subscribe so you can see these. I am talking very fast. I'm aware that I've just been filming for a long time and I want to keep this video as short as possible. Right, I'm just going to let you go and let you enjoy the rest of your day. I hope you have a really great one. Please subscribe if you would like to see more from me, and yeah, I will see you really soon. I just feel so happy. Goodbye guys, bye.